This episode of Free Mind Podcast is brought to you by Bioprotein Technology, the makers of BioPro Plus. BioPro Plus is a non-synthetic growth hormone alternative. Comes in a little vial. You take it under your tongue each morning. No needles or any messy stuff like that. Packed full of growth factors, all kinds of beneficial stuff. I've been taking it for months and my results have been awesome. Recovered from knee surgery, helped my libido, my energy levels, everything. I feel great. Can't recommend it enough. Bioproteintech.com. Use the code FREEMIND, FREEMIND, and get $30 off. Dude, sorry.
How old is she? How old is your daughter?
She's 5. We just got back from gymnastics, so she's still wearing her leotard and like running around like a crazy person.
And she's still in the gymnastics high right now.
Oh yeah.
I'll tell you what, my daughter did gymnastics. What an unbelievable workout. I did a Spartan this year in October, and there's so much grip strength associated with doing that competition. I didn't recognize, but I had to do monkey bars and I said, I did a podcast episode where I said, listen, let your kids get on the monkey bars and then just don't let them stop.
Yeah.
Just tell them to keep doing it their whole life. Then they'll never lose that ability to do it. It's one of the best workouts you can do.
Same thing with stretching, with mobility. There's like the positions my daughter can contort her body into just naturally because she's a brand new human. It's amazing, man.
And you see her doing it and you pull your hamstring just watching her.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, dude. The other day she laid across the back of the couch with her head facing down and like brought her on her tummy and brought her legs up and put her feet on the back of her head. So if you can picture that, it was incredible. I was like, my back would absolutely snap in half. So,
and she could be an extra in like a scary movie with little girls as like people running around.
Yeah, man. So, all right, brother. Well, welcome to Free Mind Podcast. It's an honor to have you. I just recorded with you, last week? A little over a week, a couple weeks, I think it's been.
Yeah, it has. Yep.
Yeah, on your show, Building Men, and it's awesome to have you. The show's pretty informal, very conversational. I love just kind of going wherever the conversation takes us and just talking to interesting people about interesting topics. So I guess to start off, man, why don't you tell everybody who the heck you are and what you do?
Thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate it. You were on Building Men episode 170. Just released, what's today? December 6th. So today it came out December 6th whenever people are listening. So my name is Dennis Morolda. I am the host of the Building Men podcast, creator of the Building Men movement, former middle school principal for many years. And part of my journey in education was in my undergrad, I was studying elementary education. I had a minor in sociology. And part of that minor was I did an internship at a halfway home for boys. And it was kids that were in their pretty much 8th grade through senior year of high school. And they were referred to this organization because they were in trouble with the law or because they were the victims of abuse in their family. And so what my job was as this internship required was I observed and helped facilitate group and individual counseling sessions, but I also got a job as a part-time van driver. So I was a full-time student. I played varsity, played college baseball, and I also did this gig after school during the fall semester where I would drive and pick these kids up from their high school. And there were some pretty rough areas in South Jersey where I went to school. Where I was picking these kids up and building relationships with them and trying to understand what they were going through, and then bringing them to this almost safe home for about 7 hours every single day. And I was helping counsel these kids and really understand what they were going through as young men. And what I saw was a lot of them initially had this really tough outside bravado. But as we got to know them, they leaned into conversations, built community. They really stepped into sharing a lot of the things that were going on. And I recognized like there was real strength in this community of boys that I was observing. Fast forward, I taught for a few years, got my master's degree in educational leadership. And then I started as an assistant principal in Central New Jersey in 2005. Right away, as the assistant principal, recognized all the issues I was dealing with in the school with the boys. You name it, it was problems with the boys: fighting, getting tossed out of class, coming to school late, ditching school, failing grades, special education, you name it. So I decided I need to do something about this. So I started this boys group, called it Building Men, and I had almost every single boy in the school join.
Wow.
And I met with the boys before school for an hour. I ran like 10 groups every single day. Every other week we would meet. And I had seventh and eighth grade boys coming to school early to talk about what it meant to be a man. And what I helped to do was, one, break down a lot of the preconceived notions about masculinity that they had. And a lot of them felt like you needed to be physically dominant. So you had to be the biggest, fastest, strongest kid with the six-pack abs to kick everyone else's ass. They felt like you needed to bang the most girls or to have the hottest girlfriend in the school. And then they felt like you needed to have the most stuff. So the kids with the parents that had the bigger houses, the cars, the sneakers, that made them better men. And we broke down a lot of those things, recognizing that all those things could potentially be taken away from you. Let's base our masculinity around things that are intrinsic in nature, things about like character, integrity, accountability, things like self-discipline, things like service to other people. And so this was a program that I ran as a principal for many, many years. Really got a lot. It was basically my life's mission. Went on a couple different iterations of life since then, and a couple crazy journeys, and wound up leaving education in 2019. We could get into that during the episode, but started the Building Men podcast after a pretty low depressive point in my life, and started it in 2020, and it's grown ever since. And I'm talking to really unbelievable men like you on a regular basis now, and it's really turned into quite of a movement.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there, and first off, I think it's amazing what you're doing, and very admirable and very much needed, especially in today's society and in the current climate. It's no exaggeration, I think, that we have a crisis amongst men, and there's a crisis of masculinity, or I would say masculinity is under crisis in America especially, but certainly in the Western world. So guys like you are very important. Now, why did you decide to ultimately leave education? Wasn't that a way to directly interact with these kids? And what I guess was the impetus for that, and why did you do it?
Sure. So I ran this Building Men program, started in 2005. So fast forward to 2019. I had been a school leader in three different schools. Really saw the enormous impact. And I didn't even mention, in 1 year, we looked at the data that was associated with the boys in the school as far as attendance, grade point average, suspension rate, disciplinary incidents. In 1 year, the kids that were involved in the program, their GPAs, and I'm not a big fan of like test scores and things like that, but it was a metric that we had, raised a half of a letter grade per kid that was involved in the program. And our suspension rate in the school dropped 400% in 1 year.
Wow.
In 1 year. So we're like, there's something to this. So anyway, I absolutely loved, this was the biggest part of my day. I loved running the Building Men meetings. I got a lot of joy and value out of it. I connected with so many kids, and a lot of these kids, they were in their late 20s, early 30s now, and I'm still in communication with them. Now I'm talking to them about them having their own kids and starting their own businesses. And so in 2019, I was told by 2018-2019 school year, I was told by the superintendent and the board of education in the district where I was working that I needed to focus on our test scores, that our test scores were declining in relation to other school districts in the area. And in Jersey, the way that we fund school districts, it's by local property taxes is the majority of the funding for school districts. So as people are moving into town, they're going to take a look at the test scores and decide whether they're going to live in town A or town B. So the Board of Education said, listen, the principals need to spend more time looking at data, raising our test scores, looking at the curriculum. And I was told basically no more of this group stuff, especially just focusing on the boys. Look at the lesson plans, look at our curriculum, look at the state standards, look at our test scores. We need to raise our test scores. And at the time in my life, it made sense. I had the freedom at the time. It didn't last for long, but I had freedom at the time to be able to take a pause on education. So I left and started working as an educational coach and consultant, traveling. And it was going well for about a year until COVID shut that all down. But that was the reason why I left education.
Got it. What do you think is the biggest thing that gets in the way for young men, especially in the context of at school, where you saw this market improvement in these guys because you sort of broke down these barriers, right, and allowed them to, I guess, explore the more intrinsic aspects of their character and their masculinity. Because maybe I'm not framing this the right way, but something that I have noticed over time is that take like the worst kid, the biggest troublemaker, whatever you want to call it, deep down inside, they really want to be something. They want to make something of themselves. They really do want to have an impact and be significant. And I think a lot of times, just from my perspective as a kid who sort of grew up in a messed up household, it was largely just a lack of belief in myself and confidence in myself. And I'm just curious, is that what you would see in these boys a lot, or what was sort of the main driving factor for why they were underperforming overall, if that makes sense?
It does. And I'll take it in two different ways. One, I totally agree with you in your assessment of what the boys needed at the time. Children need to be known. Kids need to be known. They need to know that they are seen by the adults in the school, that that the adults can carry the belief in them until they are mature enough to carry that belief in themselves. And they need to feel a part of something. Kids are they need, and I could go into developmental needs of adolescent kids. I've narrowed it down to 5 things that I really believe in, but they need to feel a part of something. Kids will find a way to get to be a part of something if you can be intentional about creating an opportunity for them to feel a part of a group. So that's what I was doing with Building Men, bringing the boys into the school. And I had kids of every single walk of life, socioeconomic category, ethnicity, like the jocks, the nerds, the goth kids, like you name it. They were together in groups. And I was intentional, even the way I was setting up the rosters for each group. They would come together. We would look each other in the eye, shake hands like we're meeting our girlfriend's father for the first time. Like we would talk about giving a firm handshake. That was one of our lessons, not a wet noodle or dead fish handshake. We set it up in a circle so there was no front and back corner. There was like this power in this, even the shape of what we were doing. And we had to shake every single young man's hand at the start and end of every single meeting. What was said in that meeting stayed in that meeting. Unless they were a danger to themselves or to others, what was said there stayed there. So they know they had that. It was a safety net for them to be able to do so. And what started to happen, Dave, was they started to lean into those conversations. And what I tried to do was normalize the vulnerability piece of it. So what I did was I shared all the shit that I had dealt with as a young man growing up through middle and high school, the challenges that I had faced, struggles that I had as a man. And so once they saw me leaning into those conversations, they're like, wow, you worried about not having armpit hair when you were in 8th grade? I feel the same way, because there's kids that look like fucking Godzilla. I mean, Bigfoot, hairy, like a Dave Hurt look, and I'm like this kid with no hair. And I remember being anxious about that when I was in 8th grade, like how are girls going to look at me? And so that I normalized those conversations for them, and so they were able to lean in a little bit more to what they were doing. And in regards to what schools are doing wrong, schools were created in this country in a factory worker system. That basically, like, schools were created to produce employees. And so kids, especially boys, were put into a box in a room for a long period of time, told to sit in a row, to shut their mouth, to not move around, to follow in line. And the kids that were rewarded were the ones who raised their hand when they were supposed to, wrote between the lines, and the kids were not able to move and get around. So it was setting boys up for failure with the way schools are structured. And I thought, I need to do something at least to provide an opportunity for these kids to, at least for an hour at, a couple times a month, to be able to get outside of that box that schools were putting them in.
So are you working with young guys like that now, or are you working more so with men?
So I work with young men in the middle and high school age range. And then I also work with their parents. A lot of kids a lot of parents who have kids in that age range are struggling with what do they do? How do they help them? And a lot of the coaching clients I have, I work with the boys that are 15, 16 years old. And then once or twice a month, I work with their parents as well. And I try to develop opportunities for connection with them and try to help the parents understand what the kids are going through. And again, I normalize the conversations that they're having in my meetings with the kids.
What is, if you had to pick maybe 1 or 2 things over the past gosh, man, it's been what, a decade and a half you've been really doing this, more than that.
Yeah.
What has changed in young men over the past decade and a half?
I think the biggest thing is the integration of technology into their daily lives. I think young men, their brains have been rewired for immediate gratification, and it's sad. I have 3 kids of my own. My son is 17 years old, and we have a conversation all the time just about like putting a pause on how Instagram or TikTok or whatever is rewiring and how that really works. And at the beginning, he's like, "Oh, Dad, yeah, whatever." But he really started to understand how it can become an addiction, and the dopamine hits that they're getting from that. It's unbelievable. My first year as an assistant principal was 2005, and it was like those flip phones or the big chunky Nokia phones or something. That's what kids had. I am so happy that I did not experience having a phone at my fingertips. I really feel bad for these kids right now because it's become such a part of who they are. When I still work with teachers, I talk to teachers about thinking about kids' personal space, right? We have this personal space bubble around us that we let people in and not in, depending on a million different factors. But for kids, and even people that are listening, your phone is a part of your personal space. So for a kid, especially if they're feeling anxious and you pick up their phone, it's like you just put your nose on their cheek. Like that's how close you got to them by just touching their phone. So it's to me, that's been one of the most significant things is the introduction of technology as part of their person. It's part of their body pretty much.
Yeah. You often hear that conversation taking place in the context of bullying too. Like when I was in school, I think, I'm not sure how old you are. I'm in my mid-30s, but when I was in school, so in 2005, I was actually graduating high school when you started when you started Building Men, which is just incredible. But no matter what happened at school, you could leave it at school for the most part, right? These days you can't, man. It's always there. It's always right here in this device. You know, the bullying can follow you around. So I can only imagine how that must be. And just like you, brother, I have tons of empathy and sympathy for these young dudes growing up now, having to deal with all this stuff, because I think at face value, it looks cool and it's amazing and technology is great. But it's just like you said, the constant, easily achieved hit of dopamine is such a detriment to young people.
And not only that, think about for us when we were growing up. And so I just turned 46 this past Friday, right? And so for me, you know,
dude, you look great for 46.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Hell yeah.
A couple of years ago, I didn't look like this. I was a doughboy a couple of years ago. Definitely went through a transformation, but it was like going through, you know, I remember the initial dial up on AOL where you'd hear that sound of like the crinkly things going on in the background. But here's the thing too. Think about for us growing up, like pictures that we saw on not even on the computer. I remember for me, it was just like on TV or in magazines or things like that. Like that's, so you would live your daily life. And then if you wanted to go look at a magazine, so if you were looking at like a bodybuilding magazine, or if I'm looking at a sports magazine or whatever, swimsuit issue or porn or whatever it was, you would have to go and look at it. And then that was it. Now the kids, it's like a constant thing. And imagine when kids are feeling bad about themselves and they're constantly seeing images of these beautiful people with six packs and girls doing splits and bikinis on the beach, and they're feeling so bad about themselves because that's all that they're seeing like 15 hours a day when they're awake. They're just constantly having these images fed into their brain. That's what I'm saying. It's really rewiring how they are perceiving the entire world. And then they look at themselves in the mirror and they hate what they see because they're constantly bombarded with perfection in all these different ways.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Social media, I tell people this all the time that I interact with in various capacities, and it's usually adults. It's usually people my age dealing with this kind of stuff. And I'm like, you're looking at everybody's highlight reels. You got to remember that. Like if I'm coaching someone on their nutrition and they're down on themselves and they don't like the progress they've made thus far, even though they have made fantastic progress, I'm like, dude, you're comparing your worst days to everyone's best days. Yep. You've got to stop doing that.
And not only that, Dave, too, I heard this statistic recently. I think it was on Jay Shetty on his podcast. And he said that he heard this idea that 25 years ago, the amount of of traumatic images and things that we would see. In 24 hours today, we're seeing as much as someone 25 years ago would have seen in their entire life, their entire lifespan. In 24 hours now, our kids, especially depending on the shit that they're following, they could be seeing some really graphic things go on social media. And I remember too, when you think about, and we can talk about pornography too, because that's something that is really,
I was about to bring that up.
Without a doubt. So I remember for me, and I did an episode with this guy's name is Carl Thomas. He runs this program called Triple X Church, where he helps rehabilitate guys that are addicted to porn. Fascinating shit that he talks about. But when I was talking to him, I said, I remember, there was this like dude in the woods, like that you knew where to go in the woods, and somebody had like porn in a penthouse that was in like a plastic bag stuffed under a log. And you could go and retrieve it, and like your heart was beating fast. You would look at the porn and you'd get that, but then it was over with. Now, like there's this constant thing, and I've had to have conversations with my son about, being in the bathroom, beating off with his phone, and I'm like, dude, listen, your sister's going there and brushed her teeth. Like having that conversation with my son now, because it's constant thing. And for me, my parenting style is like, I call everything out and we talk about everything. And if you're doing it, we're going to talk about it. I'll do it in a funny way and we'll communicate it. I don't make it like a big deal, but we talk about anything and everything.
Absolutely. I remember being your son's age and like sitting in the living room midnight, 1 a.m., volume turned all the way down, watching like Cinemax or whatever, right? Like hoping you're not getting caught. And you're right. It was this punctuated thing where that maybe occurred once every, however, days was the time scale, not constantly pulling it out and looking at Pornhub. It's I can't even imagine what it's doing to young dudes' brains, man.
As their brains are developing, they're still developing at 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. Their brains are still developing. So as it's rewiring it, not only are they getting the constant hit of it, now it's impacting their potential physical relationships because of what they're seeing in this perfect type of way, where if they don't like I remember there was like the porn that I had, I'd be like, oh, this is the one. This is the picture that I really, really like. So I'm going to wait to get to that point until I'm ready to go. And then I'm going to look at that one. Now it's like they Google something and they look for the images and then they get to that one. Then the next one. Then all of a sudden it's like a girl and a girl and then a girl and two guys. And then it's four guys. And then there's a girl and a goat. And it's like, when does it end? And they need that constant level of what thing is next? What's next? What's next?
Yeah. And social media like Instagram, especially, it's just this barrage of suggestions of this stuff. Like it seems like they lean towards pushing that stuff on people. It's very odd because my suggestions is like not stuff I'm normally looking at, and they're just like, here's this girl shaking her ass, and it's like, what? Why are you suggesting this?
And
to
God
me?
forbid you leave it on there for more than 2 seconds, and all of a sudden everything in your feed goes in that way. And I'm older than you, so I mentioned I'm 46. I can still remember. Like I had the old like cable box, and anybody who's as old as me will get the kick out of this. And there was like a thing where it was like channel like 120, where if you hit 2 channels at one time, it went to the dirty channel, but it was kind of like skewed. So it wasn't, you could like hear it and you could see like a nipple every like 12 seconds. But that wasn't enough to give you that little bit of a, oh my God, I'm doing something that I shouldn't be doing right here. And I mean, I got caught by my dad. I remember when came home and I was trying to like turn off the VCR, and that's how old it was. It was a VCR that I had to like hit stop and eject from.
Dude, and it's like the how graphic this stuff is, and how like I don't think I saw real like porn, like actually seeing penis going in vagina until I was like almost graduating high school, going to college, like it just, because it was not accessible. It wasn't easy to find. Right. It's not like, sneaking around looking at a magazine or Skinamax. You're still not seeing like full penetration pornography. And now it's just like everywhere. It's like, man, I know the knucklehead that I was at that age. I'd be like the rat hitting the button for the cocaine every 2 seconds. Man, it really scares me, and I'm sure you encounter it all the time working with young guys.
Absolutely, and it's what I do is I have conversations about it with the kids, and when I'm coaching young men, I normalize those conversations. Once I've established rapport with them, I'll share stories about like me growing up, and I'll be like, here's the story, you want to know more about it? And they're always like, yeah, tell me about it. And so I'll tell them stories about whatever, and they're like, holy shit, I feel the same exact way. And what I'm trying to do is help them realize that they are basically like, they're in this machine of the world telling them this is what they need. So I'm always like, try putting the phone down for 15 minutes and then 30 minutes and turning it off and putting it away from you. And I'm all about right now, like helping young men understand how their mind works and how to get the most out of themselves productively during the day. And most kids are not really capable. Only very small percentage of human beings are really capable of multitasking, where you can truly do more than one thing at one time.
Right.
And there's kids that are trying to write a college essay that they're snapping with their girlfriend. They have Instagram up, they're looking at TikTok, they have YouTube up, and they're listening to Andrew Tate talk about something. Like, there's a million things going on at one time, and I'm like, you need to be able to focus in and put your effort into one thing truly for 15, 20 minutes. You'll see so much benefit on dialing in that 15, 20 minutes, and then give yourself 10 minutes to look at Instagram and then put it away and then do other things. Then come back and look at TikTok for 10 minutes.
You know, it does seem like you mentioned Andrew Tate. I want to talk about him in a minute, but it seems like the pendulum has started to sort of swing back the other way. And what I mean by that is you'll see online there are young guys like Gen Z, I guess. I'm not sure. I guess that's, teenager, early 20s. I guess those are Gen Z. But they're talking about like no fap and abstaining from porn and all this stuff and monogamy, right? And it's like, it's very interesting because you do sort of see, I think with most phenomena, you see a pendulum swing, and it always goes pretty far one way before it comes back. You see it with feminism, second, third, fourth wave feminism. And now you see people pushing back against a lot of tenets of modern feminism because they are in a lot of ways detrimental to nuclear families and all these different things that people discover. Oh, actually, I do want that. That is a pretty cool thing, right? And so you are seeing that a lot in young guys. Like, it's really cool to see.
And I'll tell you why it's happened too, is because it's them being anti-establishment, pushing back against the machine right now. And it's come to the point where when I was younger, if you dyed your hair purple and had piercings all over the place, and you were basically, this whole left wing idea, that was against establishment. Yeah. Now that's become such the norm that if you're saying like, no, I want to take care of my physical fitness, I'm going to meditate, I'm going to journal, I'm not watching porn, I'm going to take, that's become the anti-establishment
Absolutely.
Idea. And I think that that's why it's attractive to young men, is because I think they realize that it doesn't feel right just going along with everything that they're being told by the media. And I think that it's a healthy thing that they're pushing back. I think it does. I think the pendulum will swing to where it's like, okay, we got to pull this a little bit more back to the center. And what I try to teach with the young men is that it's the balance between strength and vulnerability, right? It's this idea of understanding the importance of being steadfast, of being the leader, of making commitments, of showing up and doing things that you're saying you're going to do, and even taking care of yourself physically, but then also leaning into, when you're not okay, being able to reach out and say, listen, I need help right now. This is my shit that I'm going through, and be okay with being vulnerable and like understanding your emotions, where our father's generations were like, they had one piece of it, but they stuffed their shit down so much that it came out in negative ways. So I think it's that balance of really leaning into both of those things. It's what's going to help young men understand what it truly means to be a man.
I couldn't agree more, and that's why I'm making this little thing called Whole Man Initiative that I'm super pumped about. But Andrew Tate, what are your thoughts?
So this is a topic of conversation. So I have a son who's 17, a daughter who's 15, and a daughter who's 12. And it's a topic of conversation. My son, what he'll do is he will listen to Andrew Tate and he will say things to my daughters to get them riled up a little bit. And I tell him, like, listen, let's have a conversation. Just don't be a dick, right? Like, let's have a conversation. Be respectful of your sisters here. Like, let's put some things out there. Some of the things that he says, I agree with. Like when he talks about like, no one's coming to save you, right? Like, and when he talks about the radical responsibility piece, 100% agree with that. I also believe he's a marketing genius.
100%.
I mean, he's been able to capture the minds of these kids who think he is like taboo to look at. So kids that are trying to push against the machine or push against the system, rage against the machine, he is very attractive to them. A lot of the things he's saying are spot on. What I do think that when he talks about relationships with women and they're almost like his property, and I can do this, but my woman is not allowed to do this. So it's like a masochistic thing. That's where he loses me. And he's kind of a douchebag as well. I mean, I'll call, like, the way he presents himself. He's a douchebag, and that's what we talk about. So we'll take a clip and we'll watch it, and we'll say, well, what do you guys think about this? And sometimes my daughter will be like, yeah, like that makes sense to me. He sounds like an asshole when he's saying it, but it makes sense what he's talking about. Then other times we'll have a debate about it. And it's been healthy. It's been healthy, like, for us to put things on the table and talk about things. And for parents out there, it's such a great thing. Like, when your kids come home from school, like, have opportunities to talk to them and ask open-ended questions of your kids, not just, how was your day? Good, fine. Like, tell me two things that you learned today. What did you struggle with today? What's one thing you wish you did today? But then at the dinner table, we will bring up deeper conversation topics, and we will, we'll share wins and losses for the day, things that we failed at during the day. There's a lot of power in that. So once you've established that give and take at the dinner table with your family, lean into those difficult conversations and teach your kids how to debate in a healthy way. Like, when the viral thing, when you said we can disagree and still be friends, what an unbelievable thing to teach your kids at a young age. So they don't feel like if they disagree with someone that a relationship has to potentially end.
Exactly. Yeah, I do something when I pick up my daughter. I always, when I pick her up, it starts with, tell me something good. Always, like, just tell me something good. What's up? And, like, she's only 5. So it's pretty basic. Like, today it was, I know what 3 + 2 is. And I'm like, awesome, right? But I think that is so important, man. And with the Andrew Tate thing, I agree. I think that a very important skill for young people in general, for all people to develop, is being able to take someone and choose aspects of their message and what they represent that you agree with, and not throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, I think X, Y, and Z, he's spot on. I think A, B, and C, totally out in left field. And that's okay. And I don't hate him or love him, but here's my take on him. And I think that ties into exactly what you just said about the we can disagree and still be friends thing. I posted something, I think it was yesterday, and it was just, I can hate an idea that you have and not hate you. Just because I hate your ideas doesn't mean I hate you as a person. And I think we've drifted away from that. And a lot of people will, and Andrew Tate is a perfect example of this, because, man, there are so many aspects to what he talks about that I think are very valuable. Stoicism, personal responsibility, personal excellence, all of these things that are super important for young men to learn. And then there are other aspects that are not. But a lot of people push back on that message, man, when I'm like, I can hate your ideas and I don't have to hate you. And they're like, no, if you have bad ideas, you're a bad person. And I'm like, man, we will never get anywhere as a society if that's how we look at things.
100% agree with that. It's a sad statement on the way our society is right now. It really is. And you pick out a couple, like a pro-life, pro-choice argument, or you pick out a Biden and Trump, argument. Most of the things that people will, like, think about will agree upon in the most part. 75% of the things in the world, shit smells really bad. We all agree on this, right? There might be some weird fetish people out there that disagree with me. I think that's a rabbit hole of porn that I might have gone down. I don't think I did.
And hey, we can still be friends, even if you think shit smells good.
Right. We can still be friends. But, like, I've had situations even in my own family where people are like, well, they voted for Trump or they voted for Biden, so we don't want to associate with them right now. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Like, have we come so far in our society that because things have gotten so good for us that we don't have to worry about putting food on the table, or we don't have to worry about defending ourselves against wild animals, that we are going to, like, disassociate with people that we love because they might believe one thing that's a little bit against something that we believe in? It's totally absurd to me. And I saw that post, and I love that you posted that.
Yeah, it's so true, man. You really hit on something there. We don't have real serious problems. We don't have problems of survival, problems of life and death, problems of the sort that we for millennia dealt with as a species. All of a sudden, those problems don't exist, but we are still driven to confront conflict and solve problems. So I think we create them because our atmosphere doesn't create them for us. You know, it's really messed up. You see it in, obviously politics is one of the most prevalent, but I think it's like every area of life, you know, whether it's sports teams or whatever. And we connected over that Starbucks employee video that I posted. And I think that's a perfect example right there. I mean, this person is crying like it's the end of the world because they're down a person on this shift or whatever. And it's like, man, we don't have real problems.
We don't have real problems. And I mentioned before, Dave, that there were those developmental needs that young men have. And when people are listening, we could really make this work in our own lives as well. But I've come up with 5, and it's the need for autonomy, to feel like your voice is heard. And so when you think about if you do have kids, or even if there are young people in your life, like if we can be cognizant of meeting these needs on a regular basis for kids, autonomy, competence, to feel like you're good at doing things. And when I say competence, I will put in a caveat that when you're helping kids feel competent, like I believe confidence is built by keeping promises to yourself. Like that's what I will tell kids all the time. You build confidence by setting a promise to yourself and keeping that promise. There's an educational theorist that I believe in. His name is Lev Vygotsky, and he came up with this idea. It's called the zone of proximal development. And this idea is you don't want to give kids things that are too easy for them because they become bored. You don't want to give things to kids that are super hard for them that they're going to get frustrated. What you want to do is you want to give them something that's just out of their reach. So they have to go a little bit further than they thought they can go, and then go up the next level on the rung. And they're like, wow, I just did this. Now let me go a little bit further. So help them build confidence, help them build competence by stretching them with things that you're asking them to do. Different rites of passage for kids. So autonomy, competence. The next one is fun. Kids need to have fun. You know, so if you're constantly sitting on the couch, on your phone, scrolling through Instagram or whatever, watching Netflix, or just have the game on, perhaps find ways to incorporate fun into your life and into your kids' lives as well. The next is the need for relationships, not only with family members, with you as their father or their parent, but also with friends, and help them realize the importance of relationships. And within those relationships, the idea of accountability. So having accountability partnerships within those relationships, and then adventure within relationships, which relates to fun. And the final thing is safety. Kids need to feel that they are safe being able to have conversations with you. Kids need to feel that they're safe taking risks and failing, and then learning how much they are capable of doing and then picking themselves back up. One of the most common conversations that I had with parents as a principal was you need to let your kids experience failure. You have to let them fail. I would have parents that would come in and argue for a kid's grade, or argue because a kid got a detention, or argue because of a million different reasons. And I would say, let them struggle here. If they don't struggle when they're 13, 17, 19, when they finally reach something that they're struggling when they're 32, they're not going to have any reps in at failing at something. So let them fail, let them struggle, let them see that they're capable of getting back up again with you as their safety net. So those 5 developmental needs: autonomy, competence, fun, relationship, safety. If you're the parent of a kid, be intentional about finding ways to incorporate those things into your daily, your weekly routines.
Man, that is fantastic. As a parent, I'm sitting here just trying to absorb it all, and I'm thinking about my child. And I wanted to ask you, as someone who has such a strong background in child development, something that we're dealing with my daughter actually is she is extreme, and she's only 5 again, not, super young. She's extremely, extremely hard on herself and self-critical. And I mean, to the point where she'll, for example, the gymnastics stuff, if she can't stick a particular thing, or whether it's that or drawing, if she doesn't draw it the way she wants, I mean, she'll do it for like over and over and over and over. and she'll get mad at herself, and she'll just, and this is not imposed on her by myself or my wife. I think, in all transparency, I do think she observes that I am that way in a lot of ways. And I know that she probably gets it from me. My wife is far more balanced, God bless her. But what do you do as a parent with a child like that? Because, I think in a lot of ways that is going to carry her far, because she's incredibly persistent. She's incredibly disciplined for a 5-year-old. It's pretty amazing, but it can also be detrimental. So like, how would you approach that with a kid that's that way?
Well, one, I give you credit for recognizing and asking that question, because what you want to do is make sure that you have an idea about setting boundaries around that, so it doesn't become an obsessive compulsive disorder type situation, right? So one thing I would say is your kids they'll listen to some of what you say, but they will follow along with what you do. So she's watching everything that you're doing. So whenever possible, as a parent, what I would do, a suggestion would be for you to do something and mess it up and laugh through it. Like, no big deal. I spilled paint on the floor. Normally I'd be like, or whatever, I can't believe I did. Like, have her see you in that situation. And then next level, once she sees you doing that, do something with her where as you're doing it, this is going to be something that it's not going to be perfect. And you're alongside of her like, hey, this is a daddy-daughter time where we're going to be doing this together. And what we're going to try to do is build a castle of cards together. And that's going to be challenging for you to do together. And as you get to the second level and it falls down, like, that was a good try. Like, hey, maybe next time we could get it a little bit higher. Or if not, no big deal. Let's play 52 pickup right now. So for her to see you alongside of her, and we can get into a whole thing about parenting, especially when there's behaviors that come up, when you're able to get alongside your kid and experience something shoulder to shoulder with them, where they're watching you experience whatever it is, they're watching how you're mentally dealing with it, the physicality of your nonverbal communication, and then how you're processing your emotions. So if you're able to verbalize how you're processing your emotions to your kids when they're experiencing something challenging, that will seep into who they are, and especially if you're putting in some reps there as well.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great idea. I definitely need to do that, and I need to be more cognizant of, because I am a madman. Like, I'm extreme. Like, I'm type A, whatever, and I know she sees me just like move from one thing to the other, to the other, to the other, and it's like working out and this and that, and of course I try to tell her it's okay. Like, practice is going to get you where you want to be. You can't get frustrated. Don't be hard on yourself. But it's just like so wild to see such a tiny little human just already be like, oh, I can't believe I can't, it's like, man. So that's something that I just wanted to run by you, because it is definitely something that we notice. And
it's funny you mentioned that, Dave, too, because, and I appreciate the vulnerability to lean into that conversation. With me, one thing that frustrated me with my son was he was nervous in new situations. And he would, if it was a new place that he was going, there was a new dog that he never met before, riding the school bus for the first time, he would pace around, and he would like this like tangible thing that he had this tick with his hands, and he would rub his hands back and forth because he was so nervous about it. And I recognized that he was watching me with new situations that come up feel uncomfortable with them. And so this is something that we've had conversations over the last 4 years since he got into high school about on a regular basis. So much so that he has become a student of intentional discomfort. And I interviewed this guy on my podcast. His name is Akshay Nanavate. And I have to connect you with this dude. He is a total savage. He wrote a book called Fearvana. And Akshay he was a Marine. And he was the guy that walked in front of the tanks to make sure that nothing blew up. He was that like adventure seeker. But he is attempting to become the first human being in the history of the world, as far as we know, to basically transverse the continent of Antarctica on a solo journey, carrying everything on a sled behind him. Like, no one has ever done it before. And so he talks about the idea of Fearvana, of taking fear and nirvana and making it into one, and enjoying the process of going through difficult things, of pain, of suffering, of putting yourself in intentionally uncomfortable situations. So through my conversations with these people, my son and I have talked about these things, so much so that he wrote his college entrance exam about intentional discomfort. And now what he does, he's a high school athlete, football, basketball, he throws javelin for track and field. And what he did this year to put himself in an uncomfortable situation is he went out for the school musical. And he's like,
Wow.
I'm 6'4", 225. My son's a big kid. He was the quarterback on the football team. And he had to like sing and dance. And he's like, not a theater kid, but he's like, Dad, he's like, I was so nervous about it. He's like, but I wanted to do it because I wanted to challenge myself to do something uncomfortable. And he said afterwards, he had such a rush. And I said, here's the thing, Dan. His name is Denny. Here's the thing, Dan. When you intentionally put yourself into an uncomfortable situation and you come out on the other side, like unscathed by that situation, it is one of the most elated feelings we could feel as human beings when we're intentionally choosing to do something challenging and then we're successful at it. It is the pinnacle of a human emotion.
Absolutely. It really does tap into something deep in our nature. Like even something as simple as getting off your ass and going to the gym when you don't want to. Just that little victory, right? And that's not exactly the same. You're not getting out of your comfort zone and doing something new, but you come out of the other side of that feeling so much better about yourself. And it's funny you say that because I was kind of the same kind of kid coming out of high school, all the sports and all of that stuff. And I took, to get out of my comfort zone, I took acting classes, and dude, it was so like the exact same thing. Like it was the first time in a very long time I was completely out of my element, uncomfortable. The people I met were the coolest people. They were all drama people, drama geeks or whatever. And they were very welcoming to me. They thought it was super cool that I was doing it. But for anybody listening, I mean, do that. Whether it's something as simple as like take a freaking pottery class or something if you're not an artistic person, getting out of your comfort zone and exploring new things, I think, is so critical and so important for humans. But I want to talk definitely a little more about what's the best way to put this? The state of masculinity in America, masculinity in the modern era, or a lack thereof, the demonization of masculinity, I think, in a large way by our institutions, especially educational institutions. And, I'm sure you hear it all the time. I hear from young guys all the time who are like, dude, I appreciate that you're so outspoken about being competitive, running up the score, being your best self and striving for excellence and all of that. But I really feel pressured by a lot of my teachers or professors to not be that way. There's sort of this atmosphere of it's certainly bred from this participation trophy mentality, and helicopter parenting and all of that, where it's just like everything's nerfed up. There's no competition. Everybody's a winner. As you were describing your son getting ready to go into college and writing his essay on discomfort and essentially personal excellence, right? I'm sitting there thinking, man, I wonder if the college administrators even liked that, because that's sort of antithetical to their messaging these days.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting. What I tell my kids too is especially once I left education, but even during it, I don't care what you get on your standardized test scores. I don't care what your grades are. I don't check my kids' grades on a regular basis. I basically tell them, like, our standard in our family is whatever's in front of you, do it to the best of your ability. I don't care what that is. So in Spanish, if your best is an 82, that arbitrary number that some random lady hands out to you, if that's the best that you can do, then do the best that you can do. If your best is 101, then that's your line then, and go to that line, and then even go a step further than you thought you could go. That's the way that I end every podcast, with that statement. And for me, it's conversations around what are the learning experiences that you're having in school? Like, I don't care about you learning calculus. What I care about is how do you learn how to manage your time between school, your job, relationships, your family, and sports. I don't care about, you reading the Odyssey in literature in 11th grade. What I care about is you learning how to manage conflict. I care about you learning how to self-regulate when you're feeling off. I care about you learning how to understand how to work within a group dynamics. How do you assert your point of view without being an asshole? Like, how do you do these things? So these are the lessons you need to be learning in school. If you also pull in some information about the scientific method or a periodic table, or there's some zoology in there, that's great as well. But go in the direction of something that you're really passionate about, and bring that passion, or bring your skill set with you. So for me, I told my kids, I don't care if you go to college. That's not something, like, if you decide not to go to college, I'm perfectly fine with that. If you would rather say, Dad, I want to investigate whatever it is, I want to investigate how to install sprinkler systems because I'm really passionate about irrigation. All right, well, let's get you involved with someone who knows about irrigation, and let's talk about that and do an internship, or get a, if that's what you really want to do, then let's lean into those things. My son wants to be he wants to be an engineer, so he wants to do engineering science as his major in college. Okay, so let's talk about that then. But I truly believe, like, the way that schools are set up right now, it's it's basically a game. I mean, schools are a game. I told my son that, and if you know how to play the game, you'll get good grades. And again, I don't look at my kids' grades. I don't care what they get as long as they're doing their best. But my kids have done very well in school. You know, they have. I don't even think my kids have gotten a B in their years in education. Again, I don't. It's not something that I value as the grade. I value the effort that's associated with it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's essentially that whole argument of what to think versus how to think, right? Like, school is so much centered around what to think. And man, I reflect back on a lot of my classes and my time in public education, whatever, and so much of it was memorize this, memorize that, be able to recite this, be able to draw this chemical structure. And I'm like, gosh, the most valuable aspect of my education was learning how to think critically, how to navigate challenging problems, the framework for how you think, not memorizing and learning all this dumb stuff that doesn't serve you later in life. And man, it's interesting though, because the classes where, or rather the subjects that would be beneficial to learn, to actually memorize some things, like, I don't know, personal finance, stuff like that, they don't even teach. It's like you get out of school and you're like, man, did they even care about my success as an adult beyond this institution? Because it seems like understanding credit, basic accounting, all of these things is something every high school student should learn. And I didn't know dick about personal finance when I came out of the education system.
Amen. And not only that, what about learning about nutrition? Like,
dude,
like learning about like ultradian rhythms and how that impacts us. Like, kids, what they do right now is they either have a 45-minute block of time where they go and they sit in rows for 45 minutes, they walk through the hallways for 2 minutes, and they sit for another 45 minutes, and they do it again and again and again. Like, let's talk about just movement in general with kids. I know for me, like, I have a period of about like an hour to 90 minutes of like intense focus, but then I need to get the hell outside. I need to walk around. I need to meditate. I need to stretch. I need to do something. And then I can come back in and I have another 90 minutes of extreme focus. For kids, they don't get that opportunity. So we're setting them up into like them running through these like mazes in school, and we're not understanding what they need. Kids get to the end of the day and they're shot out. They're shot. Like, if you look at your kids, especially if you have kids that have had behavior problems in school and or grades that aren't great in school, my guess is the end of their day is a disaster for them. Like, they're basically put in this box for a long period of time. It's like shaking up a soda can and then opening it up at the end of the day. So when you think about, why not have every single day the kids have to do, there needs to be movement every single day. Just like us. And what we've done is, like, because it was done this way in the 1990s and the 1970s and the 1940s, that's the way we always have to do it. Why not reinvent the way that we're doing education to look at really talking to the kids about nutrition, really talking to the kids about the importance of getting outside and getting the sun on your face every single day? Why don't we talk to the kids about the importance of your breath? Being cognizant of how important your breath is and how to ground yourself when you're feeling anxious or stressed, through being conscious of how you're actually breathing through things. Just those things right there are more important than knowing the capital of Venezuela. or the 50 nifty United States being able to memorize them in order. It's so antiquated, and it drives me crazy, as you can tell. I get very passionate and worked up about it.
Well, it's true, brother, and especially these days, not that there was ever a great time for kids to have to memorize and regurgitate stuff, but now we walk around with the collective knowledge of the entire world in our hand. So if you need a fact, it's right here. You know, if I need the capital of Venezuela, I'll ask fucking Siri. I don't need to memorize that, right? And it's like, you don't want to be completely dependent on technology, but like, I agree with you 110%, man. It's incredibly frustrating. And I guess there are things like the Montessori schools, which are sort of a little more like letting kids move around and sort of explore, their interests. But it's, as a father with a 5-year-old, it's something that I am very concerned with and that I think about a lot, man.
It's a real thing. And I mean, what I want to do is be able to like turn it on its head and start again, because the Montessori schools, the idea I agree with, it definitely needs some tweaking, but it's done in such a small way that it's not meeting the need for relationships for kids, because there's 8 kids or 4 kids in a classroom, right? And so I do think that there's the potential for doing it on a larger scale. And to your point about the phone, Dave, imagine if you told your like great grandfather that he could potentially have something in the palm of his hand and he could find out anything about anything in the history of the world. And you have kids that are looking at freaking pictures of cats and stupid assholes doing dances. Like, are you fucking kidding me?
Dude, it's so true. Well, like any good conversation, we've blown through an hour. It didn't even seem like it, but I wanted to ask you really quick before we wrap this sucker up. And we've got to do this again, man. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you about a lot of this stuff. And there are so many things that I think we could go on to talk about more. But I ask my new guests this, if I remember, and I think especially with you, it's extremely important that I ask you this. And the question that I usually wrap with is, if you could give young people today just one piece of advice, guys, let's say young people age like 17 to 22, that kind of range, one piece of advice today in the year 2022, what would that piece of advice be?
Love the question, Dave. It's also how I end my podcast, the same kind of idea. One thing that
I noticed
to do right now.
Yeah.
My thing is, it goes back to the original Building Men group in 2005. There was a poem that I found that was impactful for me as a school leader. It became impactful for me as a father. And then at other times in my life, it became impactful for me as a man. The poem is The Man in the Glass. I would encourage your listeners to take a look at it. And so my one piece of advice is, the last line in the poem, The Man in the Glass, goes like this: "You may fool the whole world down the pathway of years and get pats on the back as your past, but your final reward will be heartache and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass." So a piece of advice would be to go take a look in the mirror at yourself and be radically honest with yourself about what's going well in your life, what's not going well in your life, and go through that challenging conversation with yourself. If things are not going well, how much of that is based on you, on response, like falls on your shoulders, that you can take radical responsibility for, own it, and then what are you willing to make adjustments for? Because ultimately, things that have happened in your past, they might not be your fault, but they are your responsibility to deal with. So take that radical responsibility by taking that tough look in the mirror.
I love that, man. The Man in the Glass. That's beautiful. That's perfect. And I couldn't agree more. All right, Dennis, where can everybody find you? Where should they go if they want to support you or check out what you're putting out?
Thank you, man. This is an awesome conversation. Really appreciated it. I'd love to come back on whenever. So I'm the most active on Instagram. It's building.men. You can find the Building Men podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Episode with Dave Hurt is episode number 170 from December 6th, 2022. My website is buildingmen.io, and this is an absolute honor and pleasure, my man.
Likewise, brother, and I'm absolutely going to have you back. I'm going to definitely reach out probably to pick your brain on some aspects of this whole man initiative that I'm building too. And Dennis, thank you so much for giving me an hour of your time, man. All you guys listening, until next time, keep your minds free.